Hi, welcome to another episode of Teen Pride Book Talk. My name is Lucy, and this is the program on AADL TV, where each episode I take a few minutes to discuss a young adult book that is both inclusive of and representative of folks in the LGBTQIA+ community. The book that I'm going to be talking about today is a graphic novel called Other Ever Afters. This is by Melanie Gillman, and the subtitle is New Queer Fairy Tales. Melanie Gillman is a queer, non-binary cartoonist, illustrator, and lecturer who specializes in LGBTQ comics for young adult readers. And this is a collection of familiar fairy tales that have been subverted so that typically where the prince might be the hero, sometimes the monster is the hero. Castles crumble and small villages thrive. Knights are not the ones who can deftly wield swords. Instead, it's the peasants that can do it. Overall, this collection is very feminist. Much of the subversion comes in flipping the gender norms that we see in traditional fairy tales. Melanie Gillman started creating queer fairy tales online and realized that fantasy and folklore was a really great space to imagine something better than just the good versus evil binary. So that's the binary where this might start. But then these fairy tales really break open many binaries. So something like The Fishwife has been changed into a fairy tale where a mermaid falls in love with a middle-aged peasant woman who happens to be depressed, and then they get married, and that's happily ever after. In a fairy tale called The King's Forest, the question really rises as to who is the beast in this story and who is the hero, and who decides that. It might be the king wielding power who is actually the beastly person and more monstrous than the unknown being who lives in the forest. There's a story in here called New Name, where the main character changes their name in the beginning and says goodbye to their old name. And their grandfather dies before he has a chance to learn this character's new name. And so he goes to the grave with only his grandchild's dead name in his mind. And this is the story about what happens when you're not able to correct that, and how if somebody only knows you by your dead name, they don't really know you at all. There's a way that this character has to rid themselves of this connection to their dead name, and also to learn with their grandmother's help on how to heal because of the haunting experience with their grandfather. Not all of these tales are about queer sexuality or romance, but they really are all about seeking a queer community in the true sense of the word. One of my absolute favorites in this collection is called The Goose Girl. The powerful princess in the land falls in love with the Goose Girl, who's just a simple farmer girl. The Goose Girl can't reciprocate that love because of the imbalance of power, essentially, in their relationship. It's really difficult for the princess to understand this, and the princess keeps offering these things that she feels are very generous. Like, you can have all this money, you can move into my castle. The Goose Girl is saying, well, what about all the other people that I live with? That doesn't help them. And me moving into the castle doesn't make it better for anybody else. What if there was no castle? What if there was just more of a balance for everybody? And it's about improving life for the whole community through a loving relationship, not just one person's life becoming better because they have connected with somebody. But it takes the Goose Girl to help the princess see that, and to help the princess see, and to help the princess see what it is exactly that she has to do and what she has to give up to become a person who is worthy of the Goose Girl's love. The princess in this story is the powerful ruler of this land, who is the sixth in line down from her mother. So it's a completely matriarchal society. This tale also shows that feminism includes more than just giving women power. Here we see this princess who can't understand that there are other ways to get things than by using this power. You can't create a community by manipulating your power and manipulating that imbalance in power. Each one of these fairy tales really represents the point of view of a character who might have typically sat on the sidelines in the classic fairy tales, and this is their moment to be in the spotlight. The introduction to the book sort of shows you how the characters are going to enter into this journey of sidelined characters becoming main characters. And the end of the book really mirrors that well. It's a really nice bookend. The epilogue has a really great explanation of how all these fairy tales have been subverted to really shine on those characters who are usually marginalized and cast aside. And even more than just characters who were typically on the sides, Melanie Gillman in these stories is looking at parts of folktales and parts of fairy tales that may have just been subtext and very subtle, and making that the true narrative. In an interview I watched with the author, they were talking about the importance of this being a graphic novel and why that is a form that they like to tell their stories through. They said that by providing images, readers get an insight into how an author views the world. The images in this book are very simple, but they're very vibrant, and they really reflect the sort of fairy tale feel of all of the stories. Many traditional fairy tales started off as being cautionary tales, and these stories really go beyond that. And if there is a lesson in most of these stories, it is that relationships between people thrive when there's compassion, and that needs to come from all parties. It was a really fun book to read. It was very heartfelt and touching, and really nice to just fall into some fairy tales that have been retold in an exciting new way. That's Other Ever Afters by Melanie Gillman. I hope that you give this graphic novel a try. Thanks for joining me.